Hi, everyone. I'm Marilyn, CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs and the host of our weekly live video series called Centaur Stage. We are in the middle of our second season that we are focusing on the magic of teams and what makes teams cohesive, high-performing, and happy. This season, of course, as many of you know, is divided into 4 chapters, and we are now in the middle of our 3rd chapter, all about coaching teams. We want to learn more about how to coach team members and leaders in order to bring the best out of our teams. And last week, we hosted Haley Lewis, the founder and director of Halo Psychology, to learn all about how to coach for psychological safety. And today, with Helen Dunnett, a business performance coach and training, we're going deeper into the very aspect of coaching and what that looks like on a daily basis. As you know, myself and some incredible guests go live every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. UAE time on LinkedIn, where we share our thoughts, experiences, insights, and perspectives. And today we are not recording live, so we're not currently live. We're recording a week ahead of time, but you can still drop us your questions in the comments, and myself and Helen will come to the LinkedIn comments and try to answer you in writing on the day of the broadcast. And as always, before we begin, do show us some love, give this video a like, tell us where you're tuning in from, and share the link with anyone who you think might find it useful. Let me introduce our guest to you. Helen Dunnett is a business performance coach and training. She has nurtured an eclectic communications-focused career over 30 years in the UK and Europe. She's been self-employed, a full-time volunteer, an employee in various SMEs and a multinational. She started her career in a world where faxes were a must-have and mobile phones came with a handbag for the battery. I love that. And she spent a good chunk of her career as a communicator and marketeer, which is yet another thing that she and I have in common. Seeking to understand what makes people tick, what motivates them to take interest in the world around them, and what would need to happen for someone to shift their own behavior. She's endlessly fascinated about how emotions and perception continue to trump facts and logic. That's a really beautiful one. So it's no surprise that her curiosity in people became her full-time focus and career. And after 25 years, she retrained and qualified as an ICF accredited coach. Today, she works with individuals and teams, particularly young teams, to increase their self-awareness and self-management in order to drive fresh thinking and better conversations and fuel great performance. Helen, I am so happy to have you with us here today.
Thank you so much for asking me.
I'm very excited. We have so much in common and so much to talk about. So let me quickly introduce the topic for today. So I asked Helen to come here so that we could talk about how we coach teams. You know, coaching teams is about helping team members and leaders improve their ability to engage and collaborate with one another, with the goal, of course, of improving performance of the whole team in the long run. Maybe some other things can be improved along the way too. And of course, the pandemic showed us how important it is for organizations to create that space for people, because we've had to learn to be resilient and deal with ambiguity and uncertainty. And every leader who was able to be coached during that time felt that it was really such a gift that they were given that opportunity. Coaching teams is, of course, a topic we're very much interested in within the context of our Centaur Stage season, because as much as it's about getting results and performance, we're also firm believers that it's important to consider the humane aspects of work, and it's our responsibility to provide the environment for people to grow. And so Helen, who has extensive experience in team coaching, will help us learn a little bit more about that. So start us off with a simple kind of definition. We love to start with definitions on this show. How is coaching a team different from coaching an individual?
So let's look at the team. Let's define a team. So at its very most basic, a team is a group of individuals who are forming one side to achieve a common goal. And team coaching is to increase that collective ability and desire to perform as one to achieve a goal. So you're working with the team on the collective goal. And then, so the difference with the individual coaching is that you don't have the collective there live. So I find you have to create that space in individual coaching to create space for the rest of the people to show up, and so to gently have conversations where they can actually start seeing the perspectives of the other team players. And it, it always starts with that self-awareness of to know themselves better, and then slowly to create that curiosity to imagine what it must be like to be someone else. But there's, it's I have to play that role in individual coaching to bring in a different potential perspectives, because I don't know when you can't assume. So for me, that would be the difference between the team coaching and the individual coaching.
That's a really great point. And I wonder, I've only been part of team coaching when I was at business school, and a kind of part of the program was we were coached, but we weren't really a team, right? We were just, I would call it maybe like more like group coaching, which is yet another kind of
yeah.
But I'm very curious about, actually, just talk to me for a second about the mechanics. So do you only coach the team together, or do you have side conversations every once in a while?
Yeah. I mean, so you're coaching a team because there has been a decision that the team needs some support, and they want to create a shift, and they don't know perhaps how to do it. And so what I have experienced is I will do some trainings, some very practical trainings on some key skills the individual team members need to work together. And then I will have coaching for individuals within the team, because each person is coming with a different set of values, expectations, beliefs. And so what I often do is I use a report called the Harrison Assessment. And that really helps me identify what are the individual behaviors, skills, strengths, and perhaps blind spots. So those blind spots need to be worked on. And then you can come back together and work together again as a team. So it's to create, I think, particularly with teams, there's this, they think they have trust, but often it's a very superficial trust. So between the working together and working separately, it's about building that psychological safety. Your previous guest talked about it a lot, so I don't want to repeat that, but it's creating the safety, the knowledge, the more self-awareness that they can actually show up and be more themselves as a team.
Yeah, I think that's a really incredible point. And yeah, I would have imagined that you do both individual and group. I think my only knowledge of this is having read a book called, I don't know if you read it, called The $1 Trillion Coach.
No.
It's quite fun, actually. So it's about this guy who's called, he passed. His name is Bill Campbell, and he used to actually be a sports coach, and then eventually kind of graduated into Silicon Valley corporate life, and then eventually became coach to like people like Steve Jobs,
Wow.
the Google founders and Eric Schmidt and so on, and actually it was written kind of after he passed by the people he had coached to kind of provide perspective on how he'd done it. And it's a really nice story, and a beautiful kind of, it's just beautiful to have seen him dedicate so much of his life to helping others, as you said, like improve individually, but also improve how they show up in a group and how they align and how they accept other people's perspectives and points of view.
Right.
And on that, you kind of touched on the topic of values by saying, everyone shows up with their own different values and their own perspective of the world. Do you think that individuals can thrive in teams that have values that don't align with their own?
Oh, it's such a great question. So let's take a step back. Values. It's, we have a set of values that are important to us. And what I do is say, well, are they actually your values, or are they conditioned values? Are they things that your parents have drilled into you, schools drilled into you, your society, perhaps your religion's drilled into you? And what I've noticed over the years is that these conditioned values, they become these ways that we judge other people. And I've often said, I don't know if it's my truth. I don't know if it's the truth, that, you know, people who've got high principles, you know, I'm a very principled person. What they're doing is basically using those principles to judge me. And I haven't signed up to those principles or the values that they have. And so when somebody, there's a sort of sense that their values don't align with the team, the first thing I do is to really actually identify their true values. It's a beautiful exercise I run. And then when you've got that clarity of 5 or 6 things that are actually things that I really do value, and things that perhaps I also aspire to be. So, for example, one of my true values is courage. So it's not something I am naturally good at, but it's something I push myself, like doing this live with you. I'm pushing myself to do something that's out of my comfort zone because it's something I aspire to be. So the idea being is that once you help someone identify what's really important to them, then you can actually start using those values to revisit, well, how can I look through my values and actually, how can I connect with that team and align more with that team and their values through mine? So perhaps my true value is trust. So, and if trust is a person, if you personify it, if trust was a person, how would trust connect with this team? How would trust align with this team? Perhaps trust would change the way they have a conversation. Perhaps trust would listen more. So you go on. So you can, for me, there's this, it's trying to soften, are they really values, or are you owned by them? And that they're actually really limiting your view and your perspective. And actually, you could perhaps open yourself up to new possibilities if you really start to connect through your true values.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates a lot with me. I mean, I'm Lebanese. Of course, I come from a culture that is very clear on its values, you know, the ones that it incorporates in its education system and upbringing
Right.
at home and so on. And then you kind of grow up and you start to discover that, first of all, sometimes you use those values just as a comfort zone. Like, you don't have to question them, and so you just sit in them, and it's like, well, that's a lot easier, you know, because I can always say, well, this is how I was brought up, and it takes courage, to your point, to kind of say, well, wait a minute, let me kind of take a step back here and reconsider these. And I think also I do this a lot, and I remember one of our previous guests, Tom from Sabre Marston, he mentioned this too. I often spend a lot of time storytelling why I have a certain value. You know, like, I try to be very aware, like, of the moment in my life, of an event that happened, or a series of small experiences that led me to think that solidarity is important. You know, solidarity is a big one for me. And earlier when we met, you know, I was telling you how I started Cosmic Centaurs because human collaboration is at the core of like what I wake up for every day. And I was joking that part of it is because I had divorced parents and had to get people to get along. But it's true, you know, like, and I recognize that. And I don't think that solidarity just appeared in my life one day. I think it came from a series of experiences. And I think that sometimes just sharing the story of like why this value is so important to me really helps. And Tom had shared a beautiful example where he had 2 people on a team. One of them was like very much believed in the value of like hierarchy and authority, and the other was like a complete anarchist in some ways. And they obviously hated each other, didn't know how to work well together, and he just had them tell the story of why. And for one of them, it turned out that like he'd grown up in kind of pre-Cold War, like pre-Wall of Berlin coming down, you know, Eastern Europe. And that his father had been kind of abducted, and that he'd had a really difficult childhood as a consequence. And therefore, all forms of like government hierarchy, authority were like a big no-no for him, versus the other guy who had been in the military and had personally a great experience from that moment, and in different countries, like they didn't even come from the same place. But just the fact of like saying, this is why I show up with this value, made them reconsider their hate for each other and made them find new ways to work together.
That is a really beautiful story. And there's two things I hear when you're talking, and that I would be conscious of as a coach is, is there, so the person who is against rules, it's really to help them start softening around, how is that really serving me? And are necessary rules, perhaps necessary? And I use the example, well, how would it be if we just said, okay, listen, I don't want to follow the rules of the road. It would be a disaster. I think half of that, it kind of half exists in Belgium already, but the idea of where actually can some sort of order and structure be of service to you to achieve your greater goals. So do you know what I mean? So it sounds like there's a real holding on to my strategy. And what I would do is, the second point I was going to mention is to then start looking at what are the needs that are driving those values. So is it freedom? Is it choice? Is it to be seen and to be heard? And when you actually take a step back and look at the underlying needs, we all have needs all the time, and some are being met and some aren't being met. And what we often do is focus on the needs that are not being met, but actually in that moment, there is a need being met. So just to give a little example, I might be in a meeting and my need to be creative might not being met because the situation is very sort of dictatorial, or this is how it's going to be. It could be an emergency situation. So I am suppressing and acknowledging that my need for creativity isn't being met, but my need to be respectful or to remain connected to the team is being met by me staying quiet. And I think that's something that I work with a lot, is really looking at the level of needs, that we hold tight to the needs that we have, but the strategy that we go about getting our needs met, you have to be very relaxed about that. And because as soon as you're tight on the strategy, like, I want anarchy, I don't want to follow any rules, you've made a decision for everybody else. You've not allowed that space for other people. So it's holding tight to needs, softening our grip on it has to be done a certain way. I can't hear you, Marilyn.
I forgot to unmute myself.
That's okay.
No, I was just saying that is like such a beautiful insight, and it's making me think, like, I do this kind of analysis on a very different plane completely, not in coaching, but in design thinking, which is like when you're looking to like design a product, a service, an experience, whatever it is, one example is we help companies redesign their offices. And so we'll always get somebody who says, I don't want to give away my office. And I say, great, but tell me why, right? And oftentimes, because the first thing you assume is like, oh, they don't want to give away the sign of like status or their symbol. But then you dig deeper and you're like, well, then I won't have a place to coach my team members. Well, then what if I'm having a difficult conversation with someone? They deserve privacy, and then you actually find out that there's like this underlying layer of, in that sense, in the comparable framework, those needs, which are not what I suspected it was going to be when I first heard someone say, I don't want to give out my office. And so that resonates so much with me. And I think being compassionate with others is also about yourself. Whenever you can, be like, I understand, this is just your strategy. But if I could also take a minute to see, like, why are you behaving this way? Then I won't be so mad at the strategy, because then I'll be able to connect with what you need as well. And perhaps I can provide it. Maybe not today. Maybe today it'll be like, you know what? I understand that's what you need. I'm not in the mood for you. But at least tomorrow I can come back and say, I felt like that's what you were expressing. I didn't want to make you feel this way. Let's talk about it. Or this situation might have made you feel a certain way. how can we make it better next time, you know?
Yeah.
And I really love that insight of like, just if we can all get past our own strategies, but also those of the people in the team, we can have a much more connected way forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so another thing that you and I share is that, like, actually we discovered this as we were chatting, is we were both believers in like the little things. Like, and that's something that, you know, you bring up when you present kind of your practice, is that it's not about like big strategies and big words and whatever. It's actually helping people figure out the small things that they can share or change, sorry, today, tomorrow, in a minute, next week, to make things better for themselves. Do you want to share a little bit about that with our audience?
Yeah, sure. I'm passionate about these daily interactions, the conversation, and it's something I hear myself say regularly, is these paper cuts that of the language that we use, and they're like paper cuts, and they just slowly bleed a team to death. You also have it in a family. You in any kind of group, there's certain people, and it just hurts. Or yeah, and so the little things is like listening. People don't know how to listen. People think that they're listening, but most people listen to interrupt, or they listen with a bias to picking out key things that you might have said and respond to that, but not actually really get the whole essence of what the other person was saying. And then the language that we can use language to create and connect, and we can use language to really destroy. You know, somebody described it as, you know, power over or power with. And so yeah, so it's these little interactions, and I love it when I, either with a private client or in a group, when you start teaching some tools to talk, and you can see the light bulb go on in their eyes. I actually, just before COVID, I was teaching this one particular tool as a, you know, last day afternoon activity, and particularly the two women saw how their previous relationships had gone down the drain because of their unawareness of the way that they showed up and the way that they spoke, their expectations. And it literally from there is a nosedive down to just kind of going, I've tried everything, and they just give up. And they suddenly realized, oh my goodness, I actually had much more control and responsibility, and in that respect, agency to have changed the outcome. So yeah, really, really just those beautiful moments of being together and really listening. But of course, what's really important is creating that safety and that curiosity to listen in the first place.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been noticing something about myself, let's say maybe over the last year, because of probably being in front of a screen, which has changed dynamics a lot. And with all of its limitations, also created a different time space thing where you can maybe operate in different ways than if you were in a room. One of the things I noticed about myself is, of course, I'm like a super assertive, have an opinion about everything, you know, like type A person. I always have to be the biggest person in the room. And I've known that my whole life, but what I've been doing, you know, maybe for the last year, is when I notice that I'm listening to answer and I know that I shouldn't be, I just sit back. And it's really stupid, but it changes I sit back and I relax my face. And I'm like, you need to like not be here. You need to not be expressing anything right now. And you're doing that thing where you're about to answer that person. And that is exactly what you shouldn't be doing, because they're saying something really important and you're not getting it. And I found that just like even just changing my physical, like how my face is, sitting back a tiny imperceptible bit, it just changes my whole attitude to what I'm hearing, and it changes my ability to perceive what the other person's actually trying to tell me.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautiful, isn't it? Just there was this sentence that I read from one of the thousands of books I've listened to, and it's, do I need to do something now? And every single part of that sentence has a point. Do I need to do something or say something now? And I used to have that running in my head. I used to write it on a piece of paper because, like you, when I was in communications, I was driving teams, I was the head of consulting. You walk into a room and you start talking. You were paid, right, to give solutions. And that's what I loved about coaching was I suddenly realized I had not the muscle to listen and to not have to fix someone's problem. I just go, wow, you have a problem. And actually, I trust that you will together we'll have a conversation and you'll find a solution that works for you. But just to come back to what you're saying is, yeah, that I used to write it on a piece of paper. Do I need to say something now? Or do I need to do something now? And to stop me from speaking. And I loved what would happen. She'd create that silence. And then somebody else would show up.
Yeah. I have a professor recently. He said something to me. He said he had spent some time in Japan studying a company a few years back. And he said, Marilyn, when I was in Japan, I learned that when you ask a question, you wait for the answer. And I thought that was because we have, sometimes people like me, I'll have a tendency to fill the void. I'll be like, oh my God, no one's saying anything. I'm just going to start talking. And it's another one of those little mental tricks. I'm like, I just asked the question. I'm going to wait for the answer, and so actually that brings me to another topic that I wanted to talk to you about, which is, of course, like we're now kind of in the middle of that, which is, in order to show up as a better person in a team, you need both emotional intelligence to be able to perceive others, and you need a high dose of self-awareness to be able to see either in real time or maybe with a bit of delay how you are coming into the room and how you're behaving, perhaps what you're kind of creating around you. How do you approach those two topics in your coaching?
So the self-awareness, and for me, these both sound like self-regulation. Is that the other one you're talking about?
No, so like the ability to understand other people's emotions.
Oh, do you mean more like, are you meaning empathy or just
yeah, I mean, empathy is a word you could use for that, but just like the ability to like not always be self-centered and just take a second to like actually realize there's a room full of people, they're going through their own internal dialogue, their own needs, their own strategies, their triggers, whatever it is, and to be able to both on the one hand be conscious of others and empathize with them, but at the same time be self-aware and know what you're going through at that moment and how you're showing up.
Yeah, so it's how would I encourage more of that? Is that the question?
Yes, and how do you how do you advise people about how to think about it? How do you help them become more self-aware? Are there any like tricks or tools that are your favorites?
So yes. Well, in individual coaching, it's completely core to the way that I coach. It's built into the check-in. It's built into the type of questions that I ask. So very much using what-based questions and any kind of question that really gets them to sort of see a new perspective. It's questions that I don't know the answer to. And so that would be one element. And as a team, you can help just literally by asking certain types of questions and working on a particular exercise. The team can actually see how different the different perspectives might be. So I think that, it's faster in a team so it's really, doing different exercises that would encourage that real getting of a different person's perspective. Something I've mentioned before, which is and something I do regularly in my coaching sessions, is helping people name their emotions that they're feeling.
That's such an important one.
do not have the language for it. And so I'm always whipping out, I've got one here, let me just get it out, these emotional wheels. I'm always showing it to my clients. Just like, here's the language. So it's not bad. You don't feel bad. You don't feel mad. Is it you feeling worried? Are you stressed? Are you horrified? Are you nervous? So how do I approach it is first of all to get people to connect in with the emotions. Behind every piece of every emotion is just information. It's neither good nor bad. So, and those emotions are trying to keep you safe. They're trying to keep you alive. They're biological. So what is the need that emotion is expressing? So I'm bringing it back on the table again. Needs. What are your human needs? Not the strategy, just the need. A need being, as I mentioned before, perhaps to be heard, or authenticity, freedom, safety, appreciation, acknowledgement, right? These are needs. And then to really start to listen and practice listening for, in that complaint that other person is making, in that criticism, in that judgment call, what is the emotion is that the other person is feeling? What do you think? Just guess. You might get it right and ask them, is this what you're feeling? All right. And it doesn't matter if you get it wrong, because they'll correct you. No, I'm not feeling that, but I'm feeling more like this. Oh, okay, cool. So, and so what's the need? So I guess you're needing more understanding or more clarity, or is that what I'm getting? So it's how do I approach it? It's really to have those conversations, and you can see the light bulb going on. And there's this softening of like, so it's just, I don't know how to describe it. The energy just drops. There's suddenly like they've got this language to talk to each other, this tool and language to start getting each other. And actually that other person wasn't trying to power over them. They weren't trying to, they just had an inability to express their need, and they went straight to a particular strategy. And when people hear their needs being expressed and heard by somebody else, particularly in the group setting, they feel so much more. They feel seen, and they feel heard, and they feel safer.
A lot of our work actually at Cosmic Centaurs is around that. Obviously, again, not in the coaching space, because that's not what we know how to do, but is around helping teams with concepts like emotional acknowledgement, which is like, can I recognize your emotion and just say it, like, and then be like, why are you feeling this way? Or another one is effective trust. That's a concept we try to teach our clients about, which is there's two kinds of trusts in team. Like the one around, I trust that Helen is a professional and she knows what she's doing. Right. She delivers her work, and she's a good contributing member to the team. But there's also this concept of effective trust, which a lot of people tend to overlook, but it's that trust based on the fact that we understand each other's emotions, that we can relate to one another, even if we're different. We don't have to be the same. And that kind of relationship in teams is what actually supercharges them beyond just good performance, right?
I love that. I haven't heard that expression. Effective trust.
Effective, like affection, from that word. Yeah.
And that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good resource that I also kind of skimmed through recently, it's a good one to simplify the words we use for our emotions, is, I don't know if you've come across it yet, but Brene Brown recently released a book called The Atlas of the Heart. And I have my reservations about her writing skills, but I just found that even the ability to name all of the emotions is such a strong argument. Because then, as you say, like, horrified and overwhelmed are not the same thing, right? And so it's good to know which one you are, so we can talk about that as opposed to a general negative. Also, I hate that we call them negative emotions. To what you said earlier, there are no good or bad emotions. There's just a spectrum, and you're somewhere, and you need to figure out where that is. And I think that's such a powerful message to everybody, to take a minute to explore those words.
Yeah, and there's just one thing I do want to emphasize is on that. And for people who are listening and they want to try something out today or straight after this live, is really checking in on your assumptions. This well, then they might say, oh, it's common sense that, of course they're annoyed with me, or of course they're angry at that situation. And actually it's you probably are wrong. You might be right, but really, really, really to stop assumptions and so unspoken assumptions, and you turn it into a question that you really genuinely want to know the answer to. And I think if you just started that saying, am I right in thinking that you're needing more control of the situation? And they go, no, it's not at all what I want. I'm really worried about, or perhaps they're even worried about something in their personal life. And they're, you know what I mean? So we've constantly making these decisions and choices and behavior and strategies, but we don't actually have the full picture. So I think the one thing that people walk away with today is to stop having assumptions about what's happening in the brain, thoughts, feelings of somebody else.
I love that. I always say that to people on my team too, because they'll come back like 4 months later and say, this is how you're behaving. I'm like, excuse me? No, you didn't even give me a chance to tell you why I was behaving that way. You assumed on my behalf, and that's unfair, especially for leaders. People sometimes just assume that like leaders are always out to get them, when in fact, many leaders are out to help their teams grow and live great lives and accomplish beautiful things. And it's like, well, if you'd taken a second to ask, I would have told you that's not at all why I behave this way. And I think that's really beautiful advice. I want to also ask you about an aspect of your coaching. Like, of course, I'm sure you've coached people across the spectrum, but more recently I've been focused a little bit more on like younger talents, perhaps like younger generations. What's your observation? People love to categorize people like, oh, millennials are not so young anymore. I'm a millennial, but different generations. So, like, is there really a fundamental difference between them, or do you find that there's actually a lot more commonality?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I saw that and I thought, I just, I don't treat millennials. So just to give a count, I work generally with millennials. Love them. Oh, love them. They're fantastic. And obviously Gen Xers, people like me. And I was thinking about this question. Do I really see a difference? I certainly don't treat them differently. But what I notice is the millennials are more anxious. They have more expectations, and I see more anxiety to please, to be accepted, to get recognition. But is it really a generational thing, or is it that actually us Gen Xers are a little bit more comfortable because we're older? And I think I was pretty, I had imposter syndrome for a lot of my career. So I'm really struggling to see massive difference. They don't know how to hold conversations. They don't know how to listen, but nor did Gen X. So I've read some books about the generational gap. I honestly struggle from the people that I've worked with. So maybe that's the thing. I also work with a lot of Eastern European, some Romanians, and they're just amazing, hardworking, dedicated, talented people. And they're coming with a lot of anxiety about performing. They were under a lot of pressure from their parents. They wanted to get out. They wanted to create a new life. So they've put themselves under a huge amount of pressure. But yeah, so Marilyn, I don't know. I mean, do you see a big difference between them?
No, I get upset when people use that as an excuse, actually. Like a while back, I was talking to a leader about just something in their organization that like I felt people weren't trained enough about, or like that they, maybe we could take a bit of extra time to like upskill staff. And they said, oh yeah, no, we do that in our onboarding. And I'm like, okay, but that's not enough. He's like, well, yeah, they don't look up from their phones. And I'm like, that is such a shitty, that's a shitty excuse for not taking the time. I don't like this. I think there's our DNA and our biology just evolves so much slower than we think it does. And a lot of our ingrained behaviors have been there for millennia.
Right.
And I like reading books like, I don't know if you've ever read this one, but the 10 types of human, which obviously is not at all about 10 types of human, because I wouldn't recommend that. That would be like recommending astrology, but it's more about the ingrained behaviors that we have,
Yeah.
that we don't even know we have them. They're just programmed into us. And so I think certainly every generation has its own new challenges brought on by kind of technology and the changing world around them, and maybe things happen a bit more at speed right now than they did a while back. I understand that, but I actually think using generational labels to say, oh, but millennials, they want to be bosses from day one. I'm like, honestly, I'm a millennial. I worked my ass off, like, and everybody else did too. And then, looking kind of forward to the generation after us, like half of my team is in their, like, it's their first job. They're in their early 20s. I don't treat them and I don't feel like they're any different. And yeah,
I'm glad you said that.
I'm curious because I don't feel it, but then I say, well, there must be a reason why, different generations are structured this way. Maybe we can learn about it. But I hear you.
I honestly, I think if I may use the term, I think it's boomers perhaps that are feeling the difference. But for me, as a Gen X, I love working with millennials, with people who are 20, 30 years younger than me, and I feel the same. maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the problem, because I love the fact that they tell me phrases and stuff like, oh God, I'm so old, because I didn't know that, those phrases existed. But I'm wondering whether I listen, I don't have the data and I don't have the facts. I can only talk about personal experience, but I came into the world of work, so British, in a Thatcherite world where there was no job security and you had to just be better and work harder than the next person. So that's my single worldview. But yet I look at millennials and they seem to be coming into a similar environment where there is no job security. They have to work really hard and they want to work hard, and they just don't have the skills, but nor did Gen Xers. So I really don't see a big difference. But as I said, I do see anxiety. I'm more conscious of it in the next generation. A lot of stress, and they need to know that they're not alone. And I think us Gen Xers just sucked it up and didn't say anything.
I hear you. I also think, I host another podcast with my best friend, which is more about exploring like what it's like to be young Arab women in the world. Okay. And one of the debates we always have is that I just think the word anxiety has become so popular. Like, it's on my Instagram feed. It's on every, and sometimes I just think like we've now learned to bundle everything under anxiety. We've been given permission to constantly say that we're, maybe in that sense, I'm like in between generations. I don't know. But sometimes I feel like we should try to call our emotions other things, because we've bundled a lot of it under anxiety. And I came maybe from an upbringing where I was just taught to suck it up a little bit. And I always use this expression. My team knows that they mirror it back to me every once in a while, which I say, well, if there's no solution, then there's no problem. So, in the sense that, what am I going to sit about worrying about something I can't change or affect? It's going to happen. I'm going to let it go. But I get it. I see that a lot too, the anxiety piece. And I wish less people felt that way.
Yeah. And just the other thing I want to say is, just finally, you mentioned something about, they're on their phones. Can I just point out that everyone is on their phone, by the way? It isn't. And there's me like looking at my son who's 18 and he's on his phone, but it's only because I've looked up from mine that I've noticed it, or because I'm having to do some cooking or whatever. But I'm actually very conscious, and I would encourage people to be, actually, how much are you on your phone? Oh, but it's work. It doesn't matter, you're on your phone. And so I actually think we're all on our phone. For some reason in our head, we've made a justification why us being on our phone is more important than the younger generation being on theirs. So,
oh my goodness, couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I cannot even tell you how much time I spend on my phone. I do not judge anyone. And with that, Helen, believe it or not, we've actually sadly come to the end of this conversation. I think we could have stuck around for another hour.
Yes.
But with that, I have to take us to our rapid fire round, which
Okay.
is well, you will answer the same 5 questions as every one of our guests with
Okay.
1 or 2 or 3 words, however many you choose, but with a short answer. Are you ready?
Okay, I am.
Okay, let's go. So the first one is, what is the one thing that every team needs?
A vision.
Ah, beautiful. What is the one thing a team needs to avoid?
Complacency.
A good team leader is?
Has integrity.
Beautiful. And the best book on teams?
I think you like this one too. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is a must read for everybody.
Couldn't agree more. You're also our second guest to recommend it. So what are you guys waiting for to get that book? It's a really short read too. Like, it's not like, I think I read it in a sitting, like in an afternoon. So you guys, everybody listening, you really need to get your hands on this book. And then last but not least, what's your favorite team ritual?
The homemade ones, the experience-made ones.
You mean like when a team just invents something they like?
Something happens that creates a moment, and they label it, or it's a thing that happens by chance that then becomes their thing.
Love that.
Yeah.
We have a few things like that on this team. We always talk about them. Like before, like a stressful workshop or public appearance, we listen to Cosmic Girl by Jamiroquai. That's our song.
Okay, something like that, and it becomes, but what's really important is to make sure that you onboard new people into that you have to really bring them into the story, make them feel part of that, to the point where they carry that urban myth with them when they have to onboard other people. But I mean, just a funny one we have in the family here is it's a tease, and it's, you had one job. All right, so it's usually that you had one job, you just had to cook that thing or do that one. I just hold it. All right, you had one job. But what's great is it's a tease. It is pointing it out, but it is also a way of helping people next time go, actually, I just have one job. So you know what I mean? There's a learning in it. It's funny. It's kind of it's a saying, or So it's those homemade, the experience made things that I love.
I love that. That's great insight about team rituals too. All right. And with that, we come to the end of our episode. Thanks again, Helen. I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm so glad that we were able to have it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has too. And as always, I want to thank our attendees who'll be watching this recording next week. Of course, the video will be available forever on LinkedIn. We'll be reposting it on YouTube and our website. And I always do urge everyone to go to cosmiccentaurs.com and maybe subscribe to our newsletter. It'll make all of us here really happy. It'll make Tala and Karma, who are those who contribute the most to our content, really, really happy. And then one last thing before you go, everybody, mark your calendars, because on Thursday, it says January here in my script, but it must be wrong. February, I don't know what date it is. Next Thursday, at the same time, I'll be hosting Lucy Dabo, CEO of Together, to discuss how they help organizations work around culture inside the teams. And I hope to see all of you there. Signing us off. Once again, Helen, thank you so very much.